In the summer of 480 BC, the largest army the ancient world had ever assembled marched toward Greece. By conservative modern estimates, over 200,000 soldiers stretched across the horizon. Soldiers from 46 nations, speaking dozens of languages, serving
Behold
one man,
my legions,
Xerxes,
heart of Persia.
King of
Their shields
kings,
gleam, their spears thirst for
ruler
glory.
of the Persian
March
Empire.
forth, and let
Standing in their path was a force so small it seemed like a joke. 300 Spartans, a handful of allied Greeks, and a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, the Hot Gates. What happened over the next 3 days would echo through 2,500 years of human history. Not because the Greeks won. They didn't. Every single Spartan died. But somehow, that defeat became one of the most celebrated last stands in military history. How? Why? What really happened in that pass? Welcome to General History class, where we break down the battles, empires, and turning points that shaped our world. If you're new here, take a second to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video with someone who loves history. It helps us keep bringing these stories to life. Now let's get into it. To understand Thermopylae, we must first understand what Greece was facing. The Persian Empire in 480 BC was not just powerful, it was unprecedented. Under Xerxes' father, Darius the Great, Persia had grown into the largest empire the world had ever seen. It stretched from the Indus River, in modern-day Pakistan, to the shores of Libya. It encompassed Egypt, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and parts of Central Asia. Persia controlled roughly 40% of the world's population at the time, and Xerxes had inherited all of it. There was unfinished business. 10 years earlier, his father had sent an army to punish the Greeks for supporting a revolt in Persian-controlled Ionia. That army was defeated at the Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, a humiliation that Darius never avenged. Xerxes intended to finish what his father started. He would not make the same mistake of sending a small force. He spent 4 years preparing. Engineers dug a canal through the Mount Athos Peninsula so his fleet wouldn't have to sail around dangerous waters. Supply depots were built along the route years in advance. Bridges were constructed, roads were cleared, and soldiers were gathered from every corner of the empire. When the army finally marched, ancient sources claimed it numbered in the millions. Modern historians consider this an exaggeration, but even conservative estimates place the force at 180,000 to 300,000 soldiers, plus tens of thousands of support personnel, engineers, cooks, and laborers. The Persian army didn't just march, it consumed. Rivers were reportedly drunk dry. Entire regions were stripped of food. This was not an invasion. It was a migration with swords. Greece in 480 BC was not a nation. It was a collection of independent city-states that spent most of their time fighting each other. Athens and Sparta were rivals. Thebes had its own agenda. Corinth, Argos, Megara, each had their own governments, their own armies, their own interests. When news of Xerxes' invasion reached Greece, panic spread. Some city-states surrendered immediately. Others sent desperate pleas for unity. A congress was held at the Isthmus of Corinth. For the first time in generations, Greek city-states agreed to fight together under a unified command. But was a problem. Sparta, the most feared military power in Greece, could not mobilize its full army. The Carneia, a sacred religious festival, was underway, and Spartan law forbade military campaigns during this period. Breaking this law was unthinkable. Religion and law were inseparable in Spartan society. King Leonidas made a decision that revealed his true intentions. He would march north with only 300 men, his personal bodyguard, the Hippes. But these were not random soldiers. Leonidas specifically chose men who had living sons. This was not a fighting force meant to win. It was a sacrifice designed to buy time. Geography has decided more battles than generals ever have. The Thermopylae was geography at its most decisive. The name means hot gates, named for the natural hot springs in the area. In 480 BC, it was a narrow coastal pass where the mountains of central Greece plunged sharply toward the sea. At its narrowest point, the pass was barely wide enough for a single wagon to pass through. This was crucial. The Persian advantage was numbers. Their tactics relied on overwhelming enemies with waves of infantry, cavalry charges, and archer volleys. But none of that worked in a bottleneck. At Thermopylae, the Persians could only send a limited number of soldiers through at a time. Cavalry was useless. Flanking was impossible, at least from the front. Leonidas understood this. He positioned his forces at the narrowest section, rebuilding an ancient wall called the Phocian Wall to create a fortified choke point. He didn't need to defeat the Persians. He needed to delay them long enough for the rest of Greece to prepare its defenses and for the Greek navy to engage the Persian fleet at nearby Artemisium. Every hour mattered. Every day was a victory. The 300 Spartans were joined by approximately 7,000 allied Greeks, soldiers from Thespii, Thebes, Corinth, Arcadia, and other city-states. Together, they formed a defensive line that would face the largest army in human history. If you're learning something new, drop a comment below and let us know which part of this battle fascinates you most. And if you haven't already, subscribe to General History class so you don't miss our upcoming deep dives into ancient warfare. Xerxes arrived at Thermopylae, expecting surrender, waited 4 days, assuming the Greeks would see his army and flee. When they didn't, he sent a messenger with a simple demand: lay down your weapons. Leonidas reportedly gave a 2-word reply, in Greek, molon, lab, come and take them. The 5th day, Xerxes attacked. The first wave consisted of Median infantry, soldiers from the empire's central provinces. They were experienced fighters, but they were equipped for open-field combat, not tight-quarters warfare. They charged into the pass and met the Greek phalanx. The phalanx was a formation perfected by Greek city-states over generations. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, shields overlapping. Spears extended forward in a wall of bronze and iron. The formation required discipline, trust, and training, qualities the Spartans possessed in excess. The Medians crashed against this wall and broke. Their shorter spears couldn't reach past the Greek shields. Their wicker shields splintered against Spartan bronze. They died in waves, trampled by their own reinforcements pushing from behind. The Greeks rotated their lines methodically. Spartans fought until tired, then stepped back while Thespians or Corinthians took the front. Fresh men replaced exhausted ones. The system was efficient and devastating. By nightfall, thousands of Persians lay dead in the pass. Greek casualties were minimal. Xerxes, watching from a throne on a nearby hill, reportedly stood up 3 times in shock. On the second day, Xerxes sent his elite unit, the Immortals. These were the finest soldiers in the Persian Empire. 10,000 handpicked warriors named Immortals because their ranks were always kept at full strength. When one fell, another immediately replaced him, creating the illusion that they could not be killed. They were better equipped than the Medes, better trained, better disciplined. It didn't matter. The pass negated every advantage. The Immortals' numerical superiority was meaningless when only a few dozen men could engage at once. Their curved swords were designed for slashing, not for the close quarters stabbing required in a compressed melee. Their lighter shields offered less protection than Greek bronze. The Spartans employed a tactic that would be studied for centuries: the feigned retreat. They would fall back as if panicking, drawing the Immortals forward, then suddenly turn, reform their phalanx, and slaughter the overextended pursuers. The Immortals died by the hundreds. That night, Xerxes faced a reality he hadn't anticipated. His army, the largest ever assembled, was being held by a few thousand Greeks in a mountain pass. Time was not on his side. His army consumed enormous resources daily. The longer he waited, the more his supply lines strained. He needed a solution. That solution came in the form of a local Greek named Ephialtes. Ephialtes was not a soldier or a noble. He was a farmer who knew the mountain trails, and he knew something valuable. There was a path through the mountains that could bypass the pass entirely. The Anopeia path was a narrow goat trail that wound through the oak forests above Thermopylae. It was steep and difficult, but passable for infantry. Ephialtes offered to guide the Persians through it for gold. Xerxes accepted. That night, the Immortals began their march through the mountains. Guarding the path was a force of 1,000 Phocian soldiers. When they heard the Persians approaching at dawn, they retreated to higher ground, assuming they were the target. They were wrong. The Immortals marched straight past them, heading for the rear of the Greek position. By morning, Leonidas received word. The Persians were behind them. The trap was closing. Leonidas called a council. The situation was clear. They were surrounded. Retreat was still possible, but only barely. He ordered most of the allied Greeks to withdraw. There was no point in everyone dying. The navy still needed support. The defense of southern Greece still required soldiers. Most left, but all 700 Thespians refused to abandon the Spartans. Their commander, Demophilus, insisted they stay. The Thebans also remained, though ancient sources debate whether they stayed willingly or were held as hostages. And of course, The 300 Spartans stayed. They knew what war was coming. Leonidas reportedly told his men, "Eat well, for tonight we dine in Hades." When the Persians attacked from both directions, the Greeks did something unexpected. They charged. Rather than wait behind their wall to be surrounded, they pushed forward into the wider part of the pass and attacked the Persian lines directly. This was not a defensive stand anymore. It was an attack designed to inflict maximum casualties before the end. Leonidas fell early in the fighting, struck down by arrows or spears. The sources don't agree. When he fell, the battle became a struggle for his body. The Persians understood the symbolic value. A king's corpse was a trophy. 4 times they tried to take Leonidas. 4 times the Spartans drove them back. When their spears broke, the Greeks used swords. When swords were lost, they used hands, rocks, teeth. Eventually, the Persians pulled back and brought forward their archers. The final defenders, those still standing, retreated to a small hill. The arrows came in volleys, so thick they darkened the sky. When it was over, silence filled the pass. Stories like this remind us why history matters. If this video gave you a new perspective on Thermopylae, share it with a friend who loves military history. And make sure you're subscribed to General History class. We've got more battles, more empires, and more turning points coming your way. Xerxes won the battle. His army marched south and burned Athens to the ground. But the delay at Thermopylae had cost him something invaluable: time. While the Spartans held the pass, the Greek navy fought the Persian fleet to a standstill at Artemisium. The Athenians evacuated their city. Southern Greek states organized their defenses. Weeks later, at the naval battle of Salamis, the Greek fleet destroyed the Persian navy in the narrow straits near Athens. Without naval support, Xerxes' supply lines became vulnerable. He returned to Persia, leaving his general Mardonius to finish the conquest. The following year, at the Battle of Plataea, a united Greek army, led by Spartan hoplites, crushed the remaining Persian forces. The invasion was over. Thermopylae didn't save Greece. Salamis and Plataea did. But Thermopylae made them possible. The 300 Spartans bought the time Greece needed to survive. Their sacrifice became a symbol of resistance against overwhelming odds, a story told by Herodotus within a generation and repeated for 2,500 years since. A stone monument was placed at the Hot Gates. Its inscription, attributed to the poet Simonides, read, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here, obedient to their laws we lie." The Battle of Thermopylae was not a victory. It was a calculated sacrifice, a small force holding a narrow pass, buying time for a civilization to organize its survival. It proved something that military strategists still study today, that terrain, discipline, and willpower can neutralize even the most overwhelming numerical advantage. And it proved something else, something harder to measure, that the story of how men face impossible odds matters as much as whether they survive. That's all for today's episode of General History Class. If you learned something new, hit that like button. If you want more deep dives into the battles that shaped our world. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next one.